We're going to do the closing remarks slash giveaways slash we'll try not to keep you here too long, period. Last year we did the little ticket-based giveaway thing, and that was kind of, I'll call it involved lame, thank you. Froggy's honest, he calls it lame. But we have a novel way of giving away gifts, so you better have your game face on, which will be pretty exciting. So anyway, here's the deal. This is the, our closing talk on one laptop per child. And this was originally not a single talk. When we were going through with the, what is this music?
This is Arcade Fire.
It's
the new Arcade Fire album, which is awesome.
Oh, I'm sitting up here and there's just this tinny la 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 la, like bebop, bebop, bing, you know. It's a little.
There's open sharing and there's over
sharing. Yes. All right, so anyway, this was not originally one talk. This was 3 talks, and this is the genesis of how it happened. So in the selection committee, we have a web application where all our talks get entered into, and then we go in and make comments on it, and the highest ranked talks are the ones that make the cut. So what ended up happening this time is Sean and Scott had come to me prior to submitting a talk and said, hey, we're thinking about doing a talk on one laptop per child. We think it's an important program, and we want to get more information out there publicly. And so I talked to them a bit about, here's be some good ideas to look into, et cetera, and they went off and we're working on a CFP submission. And then one night, Heidi says, oh, an OLPC talk just came in. I'm like, oh, cool, it must be Sean and Scott. And no, it was actually Jason Scott down on the end. And I was like, uh-oh. And so then I tell Sean the next day, hey, some guy just beat you to the punch on an OLPC talk. And he's like, well, that kind of sucks. But, do what you got to do. So we kind of thought about it. And I was like, well, what'd be interesting is I know Jason. And for those that know Jason, you hopefully don't know him very well. But so I know Jason and kind of what he was going to talk about. I know Scott and Sean. And Sean tried to accost me in a gas station once in Pennsylvania.
No, not me.
Scott tried to accost me at a gas station. Because I didn't hire him. He says, oh, you're Bruce Potter, huh? Yeah, you interviewed me, didn't hire me. And like in some redneck, gas station in Pennsylvania, and I got a hot cup of coffee. I think I'm going to have to burn him to keep him off me. So I know they're not really going to present about the same types of things. And I said, your abstract different, so do you mind if I kind of squish your 2 talks together and do some kind of, closing keynote plenary thing? And they said, no, that sounds interesting. Heart starts thumping really hard as they figure out how they're going to do this, because they don't know anything about Jason. I've described him as a guy who looks like Wolfman Jack, and with an attitude to match, and they're like, oh shit. And then the guy who just exited stage right, Ivan, submits a talk on OLPC, and he says, I'm Ivan, and I'm, basically the security architect OLPC and everything. I'd like to, release all the information about how one laptop per child is going to be secured in this architecture that we built and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, that's freaking interesting. So now we got a 3rd talk in play. And I've already glued these 2 guys together and basically told them, hey, we want you as this closing. So I say, okay, let's get Ivan in the mix too. So we glued all 3 of these talks together. So we got 4 speakers, 3 talks, all shoved together, all on the same topic, but all kind of taking a different slant at things. I'm not going to spoil any of their surprises or anything. I'm going to let them talk and all that kind of thing. But I really appreciate the effort that the speakers have gone to of getting together and trying to make everything flow. So we just get a round of applause ahead of time for putting up with us on this one. I think if we had been an academic conference or something, this would have been a big faux pas to just like randomly glue speakers together. But thankfully, we have no scruples, at least not after Saturday night. So we should be good to go. So anyway, from where I'm standing, Ivan, the guy from Pennsylvania, Sean and Jason Scott, and they will be executing in Ivan, Jason, Sean, Scott order, I think, with maybe some in between. Something like that. And I have to go get ready for the closing ceremonies and all that, so I'm going to leave these guys to have it out on stage. So anyway, thank you very much. Here you go.
Thanks. Hi. Good to be here. Let's see if we can. All right, that's back in focus. Awesome. All right, so this was originally supposed to be a 60-minute talk. Then it came to be a 25-minute talk. Last I heard now it's a 15-minute talk, so I will be talking very quickly, which we people in the East Coast do. So very quickly, I want to tell you who I am and not spend much time on this. I designed Bitfrost, which is the security architecture for OLPC. I have a cocky CV, which came to the attention of OLPC, and they came to me in mid-2006 and basically said, so you know a couple of things about security. How about securing 100 million laptops? And I went, So, unfazed. And by the way, we really have some great ideas that we'd like to do. Can you also rewrite our file system? And at this point, I was going, guys. And they said, oh, and by the way, your first user, 6 years old, right? So this was the best job interview from hell that I've been to. But of course, I'm crazy enough to sign on and say, sure, let's build this. So I want to take just as much time telling you about what the OLPC is doing as I do about what it's doing about security. Because you guys are a very tech crowd, you can find the tech information very easily, but I find that most people who hear about OLPC don't actually really know what it is that we're trying to do. And it really is, in their mind, it's a laptop project and not much more than that. So, what is OLPC? It's a nonprofit organization. We co-announced it with Kofi Annan in 2005. And the goal of what OLPC is trying to do is change how kids learn. So you'll notice that the laptop is conspicuously absent from this description. And you might ask, well, fine, why bother? What's bad about learning now? And I can talk about this for 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours. But the one sort of very brief observation that I can throw out there is that the formal kind of learning that happens today in most of the developed world is pretty weird. By the time you're 3 or 4, you learn all of these sort of deep things about how the world works. Things like, water is wet, jump up, I'll fall back down, sharp things cut me and hurt. These are sort of deep things. You don't really think about them anymore now, but they're kind of arbitrary. And when you're a kid, you're learning all of them. And by the time you're 3 or 4, you have learned all of these things. And a year later or 2 years later, you enter school, and there's this huge 180-degree turn where everything changes. Before that, the way you did your learning was, it was driven by your curiosity. You'd get curious about something, you'd try to figure out how it works. All day, it's something that you did with your parents and your peers, and it was something that happened everywhere. You'd get curious, you'd ask your dad a question, regardless of where you were. But after you go into school, it completely twists around, where now the learning is not driven by curiosity, it's driven by some authority figure. It happens for particular hours in a particular place, and there's a guy who is usually annoying like I am, standing in front of an audience like I am, telling them stuff that they're supposed to learn. So this is pretty strange. But it works great if you have a great teacher, and we know this. The unfortunate thing is that it does not work well at all if you don't have a good teacher, and if you have a bad teacher, it works really very poorly. If you have no teacher, it doesn't work at all. So, I'm not just sort of talking out of my butt here. I actually grew up in Croatia, which is right there. It's next to Italy. Croatia is not what you'd consider a normal third world country, but for most of up, it was in the throes of war, and the education system wasn't exactly something that I think is particularly great. So I experienced this. I went through this, and the reason that I learned most of the things I learned is because by the time, by the age of 4.5 or something, my parents got me a computer, and I was glued to this thing for most of my years growing up. So in the developing world as total, there's a billion kids. This is not a stock photograph. This was taken by the guy that does our Latin America stuff in OLPC. This is an empty classroom that hasn't been used in I don't know how many years. So what these kids really need is opportunity, not ability. I mean, clearly they're smart enough to learn. I don't think that's really in question. But they don't really have an opportunity to do so. So at this point, if you're trying to fix this, one thing you could do is you could say, well, we'll try and completely change how school works. We'll invent a completely new curriculum. We'll get everyone on board in every country. All of the schools, all of the teachers. We'll re-educate everyone, and it'll be great. And how long will that take? 50 years, if you're lucky? 100 years? I mean, I don't think it would ever happen. But maybe after a century, you could start seeing some changes if everyone really signed on board to this. So the OLPC as a project, I mean, we're basically a bunch of impatient guys, and trying to do something that takes 100 years is not something that we want to focus on right now. So the decision was, let's not do that. Let's get peer learning back into the picture. Let's let kids get curious again and have access to the information to find out, whatever lies behind whatever they got curious about. Laptops are a great thing because you can do them now, and you can let schooling sort of take some time to fix itself. So how do you build a laptop for kids? Okay, this is where I shift gear from the sort of educational, the original idea, to what this actually is, other than awesome. So the laptop, and this is a special Shmoo announcement. We've actually upgraded the hardware in the laptop. This is hot off the presses. So all of the stuff you've heard about what's actually in the laptop is no longer true. So we were previously running a AMD Geode GX500 running at about a watt power consumption, 366 megahertz, 16 KFL1 cache, no L2 cache. The cache was really pretty killer in the whole thing. Now we're running the LX700 series that's actually 0.13 microns, so it uses less electricity even though it's faster. It's 433 megahertz. It's a lot more cache, 128K L1, 128K L2. Python, which is our primary development language on this machine, now runs about 2 to 3 times faster on this processor, despite the relatively modest increase in clock speed. And I should mention the new LX will like has a built-in AES accelerator on board, so we can do some neat crypto things. We jumped up to 256 megs of RAM from the previous 128. We doubled the amount of primary storage to 1 gigabyte from the previous 512 megs. This is NAND flash, so it's not a hard drive, no moving parts. We have wear leveling running on it with this special file system. And we have a dual mode screen, meaning it can do much better than your laptops in mono mode with no backlight, API. Or it can do medium resolution color with backlight, and it's a 7.5-inch screen. And the 7.5-inch screen is sunlight readable, so you can see to the right is the X01, and to the left is the top-of-the-line laptop from a esteemed laptop manufacturer, showing the exact same image on screen. We do mesh networking using a pre-draft of the 802.11s standard. We can do normal BNG. We have rotating antennae that you've probably seen. They're the actual bunny ears. By the way, I never talk this monotonously, but I have to now because I'm trying to talk very quickly and get through a bunch of slides, so please bear with me. We can do diversity reception with the antennae. Mesh stuff should be familiar to most everyone in the room, basically ad hoc peer-to-peer networks that you can route through. We have a bunch of USB ports. We're extremely flexible in our power input, so you can really power this with just about anything that makes DC electricity. Reasonably fast camera. We can do about 15 frames per second. Actually, with the old processor, we could do 15 frames per second across the Atlantic for a video conference, one Cambridge in the UK to Cambridge in the US, where we're based. So I expect that with the new processor, we'll actually be able to do quite a bit better. We have an SD card slot, a microphone. We developed 2 of our own chips to be able to run some of this, including the LCD, which is completely our own in-house design. Special touchpad that's dual. Do both capacitive, which is like your touchpads, and resistive, so you can use a stylus and basically use it as a little tablet. Batteries are pretty standard, but much longer lasting in terms of cycles, discharge cycles. We're actually experimenting with a completely new chemistry not on the market that makes the batteries about 2 or 3 times lighter and safer, colder burn, lower toxicity, etc. We can do all the standard audio stuff. We have a little hack on our microphone input port, so we can do direct line voltage sense. You can for 50 cents sensors for like temperature and humidity and hook them directly into your computer. The Linux distro is Fedora-based, but anyway, to conclude with this, the basic idea, it's not something that you're supposed to be running word processing software on or a spreadsheet. It's sort of a surrogate brain that you use to learn, basically to condition the kid that every time he gets curious and can't immediately find answers, he can reach in and grab this and start getting some answers. And most importantly, it rids the dependence on others, and particularly on factors that you as a kid have no control over, such as, is there a classroom, is there a teacher, is there a book, etc. So originally there was going to be a commercial break where we pass on and then come back to me to talk security, but that changed again. So I'm talking about security right now, no commercial break. Actually, I guess sip of water break. Okay, learner's machine. So how do we not do security? We can't lock it down, right? Every vendor that we've talked to says, oh, security for this is really easy. Just don't let the kids run anything that you haven't signed yourself. And of course, this is brain dead. But even if it was viable with our educational model, those of you who have experienced systems like this before know they don't work as a security measure, right? Because the signature verification happens on the binaries before you run them, but that says nothing about you being able to corrupt them while they're running and do whatever the hell you want to the rest of the system. And because we actually feel very strongly that the kids need to be in complete control of their computers, this is just straight out not an option for us. So to what degree is it not an option? Well, it turns out that we're extremely serious about the idea that kids learn by doing, which is constructivism. It's a theory that there's decades and decades and decades of this, 30, 40 years at the very least in sort of the latest incarnation of Seymour Papert and Alan Kay. And we really believe that kids need to be able to see how their computers work very easily and change that and have the freedom to mess around and write some software and change some of the software that's running. And we're so serious about this that we were thinking, how do we bring source closer to kids? How do we make it so that the kids that are curious can really easily see what it is computers are doing? So we stuck a view source key on our keyboard. Thank you. And this is important. People say this is a marketing gimmick, but it's really not. I really think that this is possibly one of the most subversive and important things that we've done on this entire machine, because suddenly, the myth of, well, it's open source, so you can get the source somewhere, but you have to find it, you have to recreate the tool chain, and you have to make sure all this works. It's sort of a big investment, and for us, for the kids that are getting these machines, for the most part, the vast majority of the software that's running, they can press a button and see the code immediately. And I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if they could also change some of the code that's running, given that so much of it is written in Python, and have the changes happen live on the program. And Python doesn't really let you do this, but I went to Guido van Rossum, who wrote Python, and said, I really wish we were able to do this. So he sort of sat and didn't say anything, and then 4 hours later, he sent me an email containing a Python module that lets you reload Python code live. And I said, well, there are a couple of things that we'd still like to do on this. So, Guido will actually be spending quite a bit of his time in the coming months helping us out with part of things. He'll be implementing the view source stuff. He'll be doing quite a bit of hacking, and I'm very excited about that. So here's where it gets scary for the security crowd, right? We have this display where you can see what your friends are doing, sort of like a buddy list that actually shows you, like if 4 of your friends are drawing together, you can see their 4 icons around the drawing program. And you can ask to join their activity. You can ask, can I draw with you guys? Now, if you don't have the drawing program, what we would love to have happen is for your machine to transparently use the drawing program and then run it on your computer without ever asking you. Okay? Isn't this the greatest idea ever?
Show of hands.
So, clearly this is sort of frightening. And how do you do this securely, and what does securely mean for OLPC? If you go to the academic security conferences, you'll hear people talking about, at the very least, 12 definitions of security that are completely different. So I want to tell you guys what security actually means for us. And is someone keeping track of my time, please?
I am.
Okay, good. Can you tell me when I need to? Okay, great. So I'll keep breezing through, and we'll get through as much of this as I can.
You're out. Kidding.
6 things for OLPC that add up to security. First thing, you cannot let any software running on this machine damage the hardware. There are several chips in this machine that can be irreversibly damaged by software if it's not kept in check. That's the NAND flash and the SPI flash, which contains the operating system and the firmware and BIOS, respectively. And you don't want a random application that runs on your machine to be able to do something that makes your machine useless without hardware repair. The second thing you want to do is, it's not enough to tell kids, well, you have this view source button and you can go and change things, if what they have to fear is that if they screw their machine up, it won't. And they have to go to some figure of authority to get it restored and working again. So you have to make the machines recoverable trivially and without dependence on anyone else. Meaning, I do rm-rf/ as root and I delete my entire machine. I should be able to press a couple of buttons and get the machine running again. And because that's the plan, the machine has to be open, meaning the way to protect kids from destroying their machines isn't to not let them do whatever they want to do. We can't have data loss, which is sort of same point, right? If I'm telling you, screw around with your software, have fun, play with it, but by the way, if you do something wrong, all of your data vanishes without a trace, you're not going to feel very inclined to go and experiment. So we have to have some solution to try and mitigate that. Obviously, user privacy, huge thing, right? Our target age group is 6 to 16. And you really, really want to make sure, given a microphone and a camera and 6-year-olds behind the wheel, that you're doing your best about protecting their privacy. And finally, the one sort of vector that isn't protecting the user of the machine is you don't want these to be used as a great staging platform for attacking other people. If all goes well, we'll deploy 150 million laptops next year, and 150 million node botnet. That'd be pretty cool, right? So you don't want that to happen. Make it hard as much as possible. Finally, the last one, the most controversial one, we want to keep the laptop under control of the owner, meaning both that software shouldn't be able to hijack the laptop from the kid, but also drive-by theft and theft on a large scale should both be impractical. Meaning, if I see someone walking around with this very inconspicuous neon green laptop down the street, I shouldn't be able to run up and just steal it from him, knowing that I can, delete the hard drive, plop on a Linux install, and have a beautiful machine that I can run. So, while we're doing so, if you thought this was hard, it gets much more fun. We can't have passwords because 5-year-olds don't take to passwords well. We have this data. It doesn't work. You can't depend on passwords. We have to be secure out of the box because you can't depend on there being a lifeline for updates to flow in, every patch Tuesday. The design has to be open. I mean, this one is a no-brainer, but if you talk to vendors and some of the proprietary companies, they still balk at this, right? So none of the security stuff we do can depend on secrets in hardware and in software. Secrets meaning not crypto keys. Secrets meaning, we're not going to tell you how this security mechanism is designed, right? That's nonsense. So we can't do that. No reading is sort of a harder version of no passwords, meaning, no matter what happens, the security system will not weasel off responsibility to the user, right? We're not going to show you a dialog box saying, here are the headers of this TCP/IP packet that's inbound to your machine, and if you now have read Stevens and know TCP/IP and your operating system stack, you can make the correct decision into allowing or not allowing this packet. I mean, that's crap, right? It's not security. So we're not doing this, and we can't do it. And we've codified this as the user cannot be expected to read anything that the security system says in order to have a secure experience. And finally, the one that I mentioned before, which is no lockdown, meaning we will not have any kind of paternalistic attitude saying, here are these sort of half lockdown machines that let you only explore so far, and at that point you run up against some wall that you can't cross and your machine doesn't let you do what you want it to do. So clearly, we've run into difficulties, right? Current systems just don't do this. They rely on users making sensible and informed decisions on things that really they have no idea about. And you should never do this. You particularly should never do this if your users are 5. So I built a new platform called Bitfrost, and I'm going to go extremely quickly through this because you can read the complete spec online. If you go to Wikipedia and the article Bitfrost, at the bottom they have a link to the full spec, and the article itself is a summary. So please do this, and please join the public OLPC security mailing list and tell me what you think. I'm having a hard time. The list so far people without a security background, and I would love to have some of the people talking here and listening here share what they think. But, okay, Bitfrost, very quickly, and then I'll pass the buck, tries to do almost all of the things that I laid out. And that's a tall order. I'm telling you right off the bat that it's not a perfect system. It's not supposed to be a perfect system. I'm not claiming I've solved all of the world's security problems. I think we'll be able to raise the bar quite a bit, though. So, Bitfrost, instead of trying to make sure that you execute code that's untrusted, which is what antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-malware, and all the stuff tries to do, which, blacklists are probably one of the dumbest ideas in computer security, and I'm amazed, frankly, that they're still around. But that's what everyone does. So Bitfrost is not doing this, and instead we're trying to make sure that your system is protected while you run untrusted code. Meaning, grab a binary that you know nothing about, run it, and who cares? It shouldn't be able to do anything really bad to your system. So and those of you familiar with capability research know that there's about 50 years of capability research showing that this can be done. It can be done nicely, but it hasn't caught on in the mainstream for a bunch of reasons, many of which I think don't apply to OLPC. So super briefly, what we're doing is we're running basically every user application in a virtual machine of its own. We're giving each program only the permissions that it needs. If you want to know what this means, read the spec. This is very powerful. You can suddenly sort of get rid of largely a bunch of problems that are common today, such as viruses and spyware, which, if you're running stuff inside virtual machines, suddenly has no meaning anymore. A virus that infects itself, right? It's not going to get any binaries to spread to. It's not going to get access to your keyboard to sniff, etc. We protect against hardware damage. We rate limit with token bucket the NAND flow. The BIOS has crypto protection on it. We can restore a full system at essentially 0% overhead, storage overhead, using some really clever copy on write stuff. So we don't have to have a separate recovery partition. We just run, and if you screw up your operating system, that's fine. We can get it back for you easily with just pressing a button during boot. We have revisioning. So revisioning, basically source control. Revision control is an operating system feature. It works on basically any user document, not just source code. It also makes it very easy for you to do backups. You can, basically the matter of doing a backup is just pushing out a bunch of revisions. Am I?
So in the interest of fairness,
okay.
To make sure that.
Yes, I was told that someone was looking at time.
That was me.
Okay.
Not you. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Right. So I'll do 2 more slides here, and I'll pass the buck. I don't, by the way. So someone throw balls at Bruce.
You make these for adults too.
We'll have questions in the end. Okay. So let me just go through 2 more slides, and I'm done. In terms of privacy, we built in microphone and camera LEDs that are built in hardware in series connected with the LED and the microphone, meaning no dependence on software. If the camera is running or if the microphone is running, you'll be able to see your laptop glowing, a soft light telling you that these are in use. We require explicit user action programs to access documents. This means the normal file open dialog box, you don't see any changes as a user, but in the back end, now suddenly it's a trusted dialog box being shown by the operating system, meaning that programs can't just arbitrarily open up user documents. We made it somewhat harder to use it as an attack platform by a pretty stringent set of rules that model networking that don't really get in the way of normal applications, but make it more difficult for people trying to do things like spam, etc. And I will skip this part, but unfortunately, because it's the most controversial part, but we do have an anti-theft and activation system that will probably end up changing from how it is now, but it's a point of contention usually when I talk to security people. So you should find out why by reading the spec and signing up for the list. Okay. Thank you. I'll pass on. Are you going?
You're fine.
Hi there, my name is Jason Scott. Bruce was actually wrong. When I actually applied for this talk, it was for the One Lap Dance Per Child project, which was my program to send sex workers and strippers throughout the world to change their opinion of America. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So what I'm going to very quickly cover right now here are 3 very important things: GOTSA, molasses, and electrocution. Basically, a little bit earlier this year, I said 200,000 people. And the reason that happened was because I was hot linked from a bunch of MySpace pages. And what had happened was it turned out there was a picture I had on one of my sites of a Grim Reaper, and that was very popular with people, so they linked to it and made it their background. In fact, a company called freakhotlayouts.com linked to it directly as part of their package that they could give to you. So I didn't mind this initially because I had a very open view of the whole thing and so on, and give most of my stuff away for free anyway, so who cares? But over time, 200,000 people making it their background, and they're all telling each other about all their stuff, so every time they do it, they reload, started to really cause gigabytes of traffic a month. So finally, somewhat sleepy on eggnog this previous Christmas, I said, I really ought to switch this. And at that point, that vector point, I could have chosen anything I wanted to. And I went back and forth, and people have done this before, but at the time I thought, why not just GOTSA? And if anyone here doesn't know what GOTSA is, Excellent. So, basically Goetze is a very, very disturbing image, although I did find out that I was criticized for not using a disturbing enough image. But it's a disturbing image, so let's just say variable meaning disturbing image. So suddenly, 25,000 people on the first day loaded up their pages. And what I discovered was most of them didn't know how to get it off. So I started to look, and there was a lot of pages where people were basically saying, dude, I don't know how to fix the problem. Dude, your background is disgusting. Dude. And the hits didn't really go down for a long time. But one of the things that really shocked me was that the free hot layouts people called me for a tech support call because they said that something was wrong with my servers, so their stuff had stopped working. So basically what you had there was you had a company of people who didn't care about stealing somebody, supplying it to users who had no idea what they were stealing, who were then unable to do anything about it at the end. This is something that is both hilarious and terrifying. Similarly, when people think about the electric chair, one of the things that happened in the late 1880s was the discovery of AC, alternating current, as opposed to direct current. Without going too much into electrics, they work a little bit differently. But one of them was controlled by Thomas Alva Edison. Another one was controlled by Westinghouse. And what they wanted was they wanted their current to go into every house ever. So basically, Tom Edison came up with this great marketing technique. Let's kill animals using the other guy's product. So at various county fairs, he would load up a machine that had AC on it, pour in the voltage, and kill a chicken, or a horse, or dogs, and go, this is what they do. So they actually, Yep, exactly. So eventually, showing great forthright thinking, the state of New York decided that electrocution was going to be their new favored standard for executions. Because at the time, Tom Edison was claiming that okay, let's go with this. Basically what was happening was there was a belief that it was a quick and painless death, and there was not considered to be cruel and unusual punishment. So of course Thomas Edison was lobbying very heavily for AC to be your chosen electricity of death, while DC would be what you would have in your house near your kids. What ended up happening was he actually got it pushed through the Bureau of Prisons, and it became the fact that AC. At that point, Westinghouse started funding appeals for condemned criminals to prevent them from being electrocuted with his products. He eventually lost. The actual first, without going into it too much, the first execution by electricity did not go as smoothly as planned. It was probably pretty cruel. It was definitely unusual. And it took at least 20 minutes. So the anyway, at the end of the day, we now have AC everywhere, and so once again we come back to hilarious but terrifying. Finally, we have the molasses flood of 1919, which I'm from Boston, so please don't show me any Moonanites. They make us skittish and scary. The Boston molasses flood of 1919, how many people know of that? Sometimes that gets passed around like yeah, that's good. Basically, there was a tank of 2.3 million gallons of molasses that was on top of a hill in north end of Boston. This tank, well, one group thought it was an industrial device, and one group thought it was a structure. So what it ended up being was nobody inspected it. So it was just this up on a hill, unplanned, big pile of sugar. Well, one hot summer day, it expanded and exploded, sending a torrent of 2.3 million gallons of molasses down into Boston. This surrounded people, and keep in mind molasses, which we normally think of as being our friendly, sweet buddy, is not so when he is a tidal wave of sweet death. So it covered people, it knocked over buildings, it sent one structure 900 feet into the air, into the park, and it eventually, some of it filtered down into the ocean, and it took a year to clean it. It took longer than that for the lawsuits. Naturally, the United States Alcohol Company, who was in charge of it, immediately terrorists. They claimed that a group of anarchists had planted a bomb somewhere on the structure, and that was why it exploded. Ultimately, there were 21 deaths associated with the Boston molasses flood. Now, the thing, again, is hilarious, but scary. There is no worse sound that I could imagine than a horse that is halfway covered in molasses who is unable to move. It's screaming at the top of its lungs for something to go on with this very hot liquid, causing them to have to travel around in boots that are getting sucked out from the sweet stuff to shoot horses in the head. Again, 21 people died, many more were injured. So what we have here is we have two layers of viewing. We have one layer where somebody looks at something from now and says, that's pretty goddamn funny. And then you have the case of, well, on the ground, it was not funny at all. And if you ask me, I say that a lot of security is an intersection of the ludicrous and the dangerous. You have a case of you are in a job where you spend a large amount of your time endlessly preparing for every contingency that could possibly be and hoping that it never, ever happens. On the flip side, you have the case of situations occurring that nobody expected was going to occur, and you are expected to immediately respond to it as if you had planned it previously. So that level of fatal hilarity is what we're talking about with the one laptop per child. We're talking about a group of speculations here about this laptop. Because from out here, it's very funny. As soon as you look at one of these candy-colored little bastards, you want to sprinkle it all over the muffin of Africa because it's so beautiful and wonderful. And, you know, and that's part of its appeal, is the fact that it's so wonderful that you have adults wanting to buy it. Nobody here, like, as soon as they heard about the new Barbie goes, well, okay, a couple of you do. But you basically have a case where it is such an alluring just on the surface of it. Candy-colored laptop, really cheap, goes out I want one, you know? It's rare that you want to, you know, you don't normally hear from the Red Cross, oh, the Red Cross is going to dump food. Give me some of that. So basically, we're just going to cover, my colleagues here are just going to very quickly cover, again, one of these ludicrous, viewing every infinite possibility of things that could possibly go a little off associated with it, and things that you might want to think about as these little sprinkles over the muffin of your lands. That's all.
First of all, I want to say I'm really bitter that you heard what I was going to wear today and decided to copy me.
It's a uniform, not uniform.
So who I am, I'm Scott Roberts. I'm an independent security person who enjoys this kind of stuff and stumbled across this OLPC thing and thought, wow, that's kind of cool. Like everybody else and everybody else is thinking, but 100 million botnet, that's not really as much fun. So my disclaimer. Everything I say I found on the internet, a lot of it on laptop.org, which is the OLPC site, a lot of it in the mailing list, a lot of it other random places. So to quote somebody we all know and love, first of all, don't believe anything I say. So what's the state of things that we're dealing with right now? Well, we have Bitfrost, which I haven't developed. We have the current state of open source security come along with it. And we have lessons we've learned from a great company we also know and love called Microsoft. Oh, that was good. I'm going to get to that. Give me some time. So what is Bitfrost? Bitfrost is a custom designed security architecture based on forgetting old assumptions. No backwards compatibility, no dealing with what we used to have. It's all new, it's all different, and that was long overdue. It's got a bunch of features that no one's ever thought of before. All overdue. Why the hell can you run Solitaire and have it have the same permission to write files? And it's built on absolutely no passwords, which we'll eventually get to. Lessons learned from our friends at Microsoft. Well, they dealt with some security problems for a while. We've all been through Blaster, we've seen Sasser, we've seen Slammer. But then they made plans to fix them. They came up with the Microsoft Security Response Center, they came up with the Secure Development Lifecycle. And you know what? They aren't perfect, but they've gotten a whole lot better. So what about open source security? Well, it's good, but it's not perfect. Open source does have a tendency to respond fairly well to most security issues. And most open source teams are very conscious about security and do a great job with it. We still sometimes have issues. So what's coming up with the OLPC? Well, we're going to have a bunch of different challenges. We're going to have to deal with cryptography, going to have to deal with the normal threats that we see every day. We're going to be running a different networking setup. There's patching, and there's a server. So cryptography, it's a 400 megahertz processor. Now, along with the whole everything I say, I just got off the internet. Some of that stuff on the internet isn't quite kept up to date, so forgive me if Ivan's ruined a bunch of my points. 400 megahertz processor may limit cryptographic performance. Well, we're now getting a cryptography accelerator, so that's going to be a little bit better. But we still have some people who, at least at one point, were concerned on the mailing list about the fact that you're going to be limited in how much cryptography you can actually use and how deep it can go. Hardware keys and hashes mean no revocation if there's a problem that gets to that point. Now, Ivan's done a lot of stuff to try to get around that. It's still something that might, at some point, have to be dealt with in that terrible and hilarious situation. Permissions for the keys are somewhat ambiguous. This is being defined a lot better as things are going along. Unfortunately, Ivan's got him and his team that I guess updating stuff on the website isn't priority number one. Students can request keys that allow for what? And what about when you're an open source developer? What can your key do? Can you install on everybody? Can you install only when people give you permission? These are things that are being hashed out, but are things that need to be considered and we need to be concerned with. Other challenges that have to be dealt with is the fact that cryptography is considered munitions by the United States government. Well, we've got a lot of countries we don't exactly ship munitions to. And there's a lot of ambiguous law that goes along with this, but we've got to be really careful about what cryptography is put into place and where it's sent. So the definitive answer is maybe. Immediate threats. This is the stuff you folks deal with every day. We have service attacks. We have web threats. Cross-site scripting. Who saw JIC2? Did that scare anyone? Okay, I guess so. We have phishing and social engineering. You know, again, we have an untaught user group. They don't know. If you tell them this is a fun game, you should try it, they may end up solving 500 million CAPTCHAs for you. OpenID. A lot of the authentication with web-based stuff, since again, we don't want to deal with passwords, might be based on OpenID. Ben Laurie, I think, is somewhere around here, and he's shown that there's a lot of interesting applications as far as phishing that come along with OpenID. It's been the past year, it's been nothing but malformed input. How many people really feel comfortable using Word right now? And you can borrow stuff. Part of the whole beauty and goals of this project is to make all applications shareable. Well, what about when your friend tells you he's got this really awesome Drug Wars game, and by the way, it has a mass mailer associated? I thought so. So next generation networking. We're doing IPv6. Now, there's a lot of stuff about IPv6, but how much do we really know about it? This is going to be the first, maybe second major deployment if you count the US government. IPsec, I think Ivan had an opinion on that he gave me earlier today, which, yeah, probably not. Mesh networking, how cool is that? This is one of those things we wanted for so long. Unfortunately, it comes along with some fun things, like really unique DO conditions. What about when you're the last guy in the chain that's connected to the internet? And unique sharing and a possible propagation place. You know, what happens when somebody manages to exploit the drivers for the Wi-Fi and suddenly you're propagating via mesh networking? That's sure a lot easier than going through a router. The server. We don't really know yet. Ivan's told me a little bit more about it just talking today, but the point is it's not online. You can't review it and see it. Is there going to be a Bitfrost server edition? I'm going to say signs point to yes. The internet has to come from somewhere. That means it can be stopped from somewhere. You have backups and programs all running off this server. Patching also is kind of an ambiguous thing right now. It's talked about. There's some mentions of it in various libraries and things like that, but we don't really know. And what happens when your server dies? You know, if everybody goes along with the CIA triangle, availability is part of the deal. So if you don't have a server that's your internet, your backup, and everything, where are you going to go next? So what needs to come later? First of all, a security response program, going back to what we got from Microsoft. You're going to have to deal with threats. It's just a matter of time. I give a lot of credit to the OpenBSD guys, because whether you consider it an actual exploit or not, they did a really great job responding to a vulnerability in a quick and organized manner. How are you going to detect when there is a problem with the OLPC? We haven't really sorted that out yet. Remediation, there's a kill switch, there's going to be the ability to patch, but what else can be done if there is a node on the network that's having problems? And I think the model to try to put together a program like this is like the SANS Internet Storm Center. A group of people who just do it on their free time, but are experts in. There needs to be a developer security program, because the only way you can circumvent this is writing bad applications. Well, not the only way, but. So it's really easy to find a lot of stuff about how to do secure coding, but how easy is it to do secure coding? Bitfrost is unique, and it has certain constraints that go along with it, but going in that vein, you also have to be coding recognizing the security that comes with Bitfrost. So where's this going to go? Well, even good systems will get better with time and with more people putting their eyes on it. And this is where all you people come in. As more of this code gets released, and as more people can get eyes on it, it will get better. Ivan, already said, go read the Bitfrost spec. Get on the mailing list. I'm going to say, there's also images for a lot of this stuff available. Go on, try to break it. I tried to mess around with this thing, and every time I opened this thing up, somebody had to come steal it out of my hands. I'm sure a lot of you were problems with that. So get involved, read the Bitfrost spec, contribute to the mailing list. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sean Coyne. Are you going to back up?
With an interjection, the security stuff is not yet in the images. So the core of Bitfrost should be landing any day now, and the network should be landing in the next 3 to 4 months. So if you download the images, you can see the GUI, you can play with it, but the security is not there yet. Okay, Sean.
All right, so I'm Sean Coyne. I don't have time for the typical presentation foreplay. I'll just try and blow through this quick. I'm part of Vulnerable Minds with Scott Roberts. If you want to know more about me, I guess just Google it. My slides are on yours, man. Oh, God.
Do you have a photo? All right.
All right. So where to begin? So you've heard what Bitfrost is trying to do, what OLPC is all about. We have historical examples of where technology and just unintended consequences have gone wrong, and we understand there's still a lot to do. So just how bad can this potentially get? I'll try and keep it realistic in my doomsaying. During the whole brainstorming process, somebody suggested to me the idea that the kids will get spam for online pharmacies and then they'll be running around Africa hopped up on herbal Viagra. I was like, I'm going to put that in scenario. Thanks for contributing. And again, there's an immense amount of good in OLPC. I don't want to come up here and be the negative down on OLPC guy. If you would like to hear the singing of praises of how good this potentially be, please go to laptop.org. This is all hate right here. This is just the negative side. So OLPC represents what I think is kind of a step in technology for technology's sakes. People that are all about technology, that are enthusiasts, that love it, sometimes get caught up in the misconception that technology can just solve all problems. Like, we'll just add laptops. Technology will fix it. Like, step 1, give kids laptops. Step 2, not really sure. Step 3, utopia. Like, this will work. Not necessarily. A laptop, in and of itself, a computer, just does not equal education. There was a huge drive all through the 90s, thank you, to get schools wired, to get schools the internet, to replace libraries with computers. Not a lot. The computer itself can't teach. It's mostly about content and the teacher and the curriculum, and do these things fit together. So there's a huge dependency on content and what's being developed for this OLPC for that. Then there's the design of the OLPC itself. The computer itself is a learning machine in as much as it's made to be malleable in the field. There's the press source button. You can see all the code. You can swap out parts. As far as creativity of the kids and interest in the technology, it's fantastic for that. At the same time, that's its weakness. It can educate through people changing it, but through people changing it, they can disregard or nullify all security concerns, make it into something totally else, and basically, well, throw away all the good work Ivan's done, turn it into whatever they want. This can be good or bad. This represents basically, thanks, just an organic experimentation in technology and culture. Like, we're just going to put the laptops in there and see what happens. There's not much more that you be done through that. OLPC realizes that, and beyond a certain degree, they realize that some is just not controlled. And of course, one of the biggest things is how many Star Trek fans in the audience? Oh, that few? For those who don't know, the Prime Directive, originally developed by Margaret Mead in anthropological studies, but in Star Trek universe, the Prime Directive stated that as they're flying around on the Enterprise, if they come across a culture that doesn't have warp drive or doesn't have faster than light travel, they won't contact them, because that would offset their own cultural development. And you'd artificially bias that. OLPC represents that in a pretty serious way. Not so much the computer itself, but everything that comes along with the computer, basically the pipeline to the internet that this thing comes with. So you have the internet itself, which is culturally dominated by Western society, at least 50, go us. At least 50 to 80% of internet content's in English. And now all that's being piped right into the client nations. Most of that's German. All that stuff is being piped right. All that stuff's being piped right into these client nations. And we're not really sure who's ready for it. Like, are these cultures ready for YouTube? Like, if this is just the unfiltered internet, just have at it. So now, again, what potential problems are we looking at? First off, social engineering and spam on these kids is going to be a big issue. They're already trusting in the goodwill of Western society. They gave us these laptops. They must be good people. They wouldn't, nobody's going to steal from us until, what other... until they get an email that says, hello, I am executor of an account from the promised land of New Jersey, and recently our governor has been deposed, and now I am treasurer, and I need to get my money out. So if you're set up an account, kind of a new twist on an old favorite. So, and who knows what else there could be. So there's a ton of potential social engineering and spamming concerns just for the kids, just for that generation, or that generation, age group that is so potentially vulnerable. As far as user education, we don't even have user education in corporate America, who you can. And of course we got your typical environmental concerns. You can't just take a laptop once you're done with it, toss it into a landfill. You're not supposed to. Projected lifespan on these is 5 years. That's great. And people are going to swap parts out. They're field upgradable. Also fantastic. But beyond that, or once they break down and the kid can't fix it himself, where does this thing go? Are they just going to end up littering the streets? Or like once the kid is confused to the point he's lost interest, is just hooked out the window? These are a lot of questions I just don't have answers for, other than putting them out there. Jealousy within the family. Are the older kids jealous that only 5 to 12-year-olds get this? Does the rest of society going to want one, and who services those needs? Are families going to want to run their businesses on it? Does dad use the laptop at night to balance the books? Who is supplying the demand for technology that's going to follow this? And is there an infrastructure of low-cost technology dealers to supply to third world nations? There's not going to be, and then what's going to fill that gap, or what's going to fill that hole? Health and social development of the kids. Recently, was it Taiwan or India? I think Taiwan, after the coup, canceled their order for OLPC. Okay. The education minister cited some examples of, like, it'll make kids lazy, they'll get carpal tunnel syndrome, we're not interested. It probably had more to do with the fact that these things aren't made in Taiwan. But the point being, those are real concerns. Kids play too much on games, kids get carpal tunnel, develop poor eyes, whatever you want to say. If that happens, I heard somebody just scream out ADHD. If that happens, is some uppity politician in that area who wants to like demonize some other group going to say, look at what happened, these people gave us laptops, turned all our kids into like no attention span, made them just like Americans, goddamn them. And then that just comes back on us as another negative spin. Okay, so who are the potential bad guys? Who is potentially going to make a concerted effort to really just pervert the good intention of this thing? First, don't get ahead of me. First group.
Bush over there?
First group, the client nations themselves. What kind of insurances do we have that they're going to use this in the spirit that was intended? If we provide these laptops, it's the government paying for them, and they're distributing them supposedly on the premise of one laptop per child. That's great. But are they going to see it that way? Even if they say yes, are they like, well, we're only going to hand it out if we put a Trojan on it, and we're going to monitor our people. We need certain modification before we distribute these for the good of our people. Are they allowed to watch are they allowed to set up national firewalls like China does, monitor content, limit the amount of information that gets in? You know, like, oh, we only let in our special version of Wikipedia where we tell the people what their history is. We don't let like any kind of open source, anything like that. Again, not in the spirit of this project. What are the odds that some culture is going to want to turn one of these things into a tool for just crushing civil liberties and monitoring their Oh, so every kid is going to have one of these, huh? Well, this is an excellent opportunity to track the little bastards and make sure where they're going inside my country, because I'm a military strongman and I crush my people's hearts. And then, of course, there's the military applications. Who knows about the Department of Defense's Advanced Warfighter Program? It's a idea, yeah, concepts to modernize the battlefield, connect soldiers, you know, command control, intel, all that stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff to the suit, but specifically communications and the technology aspect, they've got some impressive things. Command and control features, stuff where the soldier can show other people what he's looking at, talk to his buddies, talk to command, get intel, talk to those people. So how does that compare with countries that employ child soldiers, and there are plenty, strapped with just one AK-47 and an OLPC? Well, the OLPC's got a webcam and the microphone, so you can take pictures of whatever you want, do recon, send it back to your man or whoever you're working for, get orders, command and control, talk to your other friends with their OLPC, and yeah, I got my AK, let's go here. Track movements of your soldiers, online chat. Basically, just with Google, you could basically, and an OLPC, do all the stuff that DoD has spent millions of dollars to try to do. And you'd want to use the OLPC for it for these reasons. Chipset's hardened, it's lightweight, it's small, it's human-powered, and it's multifunctional, and worst of all, it's innocent looking. And of course, as my friend said, now, radical fundamentalist, terrorist, what could they potentially want to do with this thing? Basically all the common stuff they'd want to do now, but now they have a pipeline right to these kids potentially. Propaganda distribution, that will be a huge element. No laugh on that one? So, distribution of Trojans, there's just so much computing power now because of these that doing a large-scale botnet or doing a large-scale DDoS would be easy. You wouldn't even need a Trojan necessarily if you had done the propaganda right and you distributed it as a game and just say, like, all right, here's a list of IPs, here's the ping buttons and packets at this time, this date, everybody just go do it. Perfectly feasible. And then, of course, we all love the Anarchist Cookbook. I don't know about you, when I first got online, one of the first things I went to download for after the porn was Anarchist Cookbook. I don't know what it is, but I got to have it. Like having fireworks or a lighter, just as a kid, you felt dangerous. And some of that. So that's already out there. All it would take is anybody who's in one of these groups, an Al-Qaeda or Fatwa, Hamas, what have you, just write it up, put it on the internet for all the kids to have, and then that knowledge is out there, and then as long as you can get into their heads who they should use it against, done deal. And then, of course, you have my catch-all general criminal organizations. 10 million known botnet is a pretty attractive amount of computing power for anybody, for whatever you want to use it for. Against, pick your poison. It's probably not going to be the SETI project, I'll tell you that now. I'm going to, you want to break encryption, you want to work on algorithms, you want to rent the time out for some country that's pursuing a nuke. If you got the money, we got the laptops. Or they will have stolen the laptops either way. Same other ills that go on. Slave trade. Child abuse. If you can't handle it, I'll take it away. All these kids have laptops, all the laptops have webcams. If you've got a Trojan on there, or you're watching any of the kids, or you're just seeing them on some kind of social networking site, you can almost pick, like, yes, abduct that child, that is the one I shall kidnap. Just a general social ill that needs to be considered, and it's almost like what you either educate the kids or you just don't have it, because it's out there. And then, of course, these already exist a lot in Asia. If there's money to be had at these things, and exploited, kids can get exploited. Kids with laptops can get exploited pretty hard. I would say more about child pornography in the third world. National Geographic pretty much has that covered. And then, of course, my catch-all now, just the lone hacker, just the random guy, the guy I haven't thought of. Somebody who just is generally malicious and wants to shit on the project, or you have a laptop, I'm going to destroy it. As far as impossible situations becoming more likely, just those hypothetical, only in a movie, I've captured the infrastructure of this third world It's all in the World Bank. Done deal. With new cultures, you have new thought processes. People look at things differently. So there's going to be methods and directions that, as we in Western society, even assuming nothing, just don't consider, or just otherwise would have never thought of. This goes back to my point originally about impossible situations. That's really just a funny point, to be honest with you. But future impact. What is the impact of skipping developmental steps for these people? With previous charity models, it was like, we'll provide food or money or farming equipment, and each one of those allows you to take a step, another rung on the ladder to get higher up, eventually building towards self-sufficiency and technology. OLPC negates all that. We're just going to jump you right forward to technology. That's bad, potentially, in the sense that if you have a person that's starving, like when they broke people out of the concentration camps in World War II, you can't just feed them right away. It'll kill them. You have to slowly work them up to eating normal food. With this, it's kind of the same thing with technology. You've just dumped it in their laps. On one hand, it's fantastic because this has the potential to raise up other aspects of their culture, like they can look for information on farming, on social ills, on medicine. It's fantastic in that sense. As far as the culture assimilating the technology, all bets are off. Developmental imbalances as far as is ready for this. They haven't hashed out issues with privacy and piracy. General social issues that we have that revolve around security that revolve around technology that we haven't even addressed. And now they're just thrust in third world where they haven't even ramped up to that point. They're not even on their table as far as considerations. Another prediction of mine is within one generation, you're probably going to see a lot of outsourcing to Africa. Generally, it's a good thing if the money's flowing in that environment. You're going to have a large, technically capable workforce who has familiarity with technology and now is pretty much going to be English speaking because all the content on the internet is English, the keyboards are in English. Like it or love it. Like it or lump it. Is that the phrase?
Like it or love it is a great one to give to somebody.
All right, speak English or your host. Internet cost, so, okay. And then what's the effect of millions upon millions of these kids suddenly being on the internet? What sites are going to become dominated by them? Where does this go? One example of this is when South Korea had the fiber optic channels laid through there, and so many kids started playing MMORPGs, and I think like StarCraft became like their national sport. So technology in the third world client nations is almost predestined now to evolve in a wireless format. Just something, again, to consider. This is where this is going to go. And of course, disintermediation. As far as getting exotic goods out of third world nations, one link in the chain is removed because now you can talk directly to them. You're going to see a lot of stores open up for exportation of unique goods. A lot of middlemen will be cut out. So in that sense, again, economically, this will pay off within one generation very well. So, parting thoughts. As Bruce said on the first day, nobody cares about security but security people. Pretty much the contents of this room. Normal users don't care as long as it works right. So for this project to really be a success and not be exploited as badly as it potentially could be, a lot rests on the shoulders of open source developers and security people like everyone in this room to put a modicum of work in towards shepherding this project from abuse. So in that sense, I hope everyone signs up for the mailing list. Please visit the Wikipedia page. Good luck. Good luck to us all.
So, I know it's sort of, it's Sunday afternoon. You guys want to get out of here, and hopefully I will entice you to stay a little by telling you that I decided, so this is my personal XO, and we're running a little low on developer machines, so I can't normally give this one out, but I'll take some questions, and ask me anything, basically. And if I hear a question that I find really good, something that I haven't thought about, I will give you my personal XO. So hopefully that'll keep you in the room for a little bit.
And I will, after, we'll just hit up for a few questions because we were able to actually somehow miraculously make this thing go together. After this, I will stand over there with one of these. So if you want to, I don't know, touch it.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll be in the corner.
Okay, I'm told we only have 5 minutes for questions, so we need to make this quick. Yes? Yes, there is a firewall running on the machine. So yes, you could do that. I see people. Dan Kaminsky, I'm going to skip him. Other people in the room. All right, go. Okay, sure.
Quick one. Will the hardware increase change the price? The current $150.
Will the hardware increase change the price? The answer is yes, but it should be a very, very modest increase in price. Okay. Someone actually get Kaminsky a microphone because I want to hear what he's cooking up. Yes?
Have you actually thought about the long-term effects, like building a generation that actually comes up with this and the different things that they're going to do as far as how they're going to be aware of these types of things and the leapfrog that that's going to cause, like on the grander scale, like 50 years down the road? I know you've thought about it for the first 10 or so years, but longer term, like what's this?
In terms of just complete impact, I mean, I don't know, you know, I forget who it was. It was someone it was Mark Jason Dominus in the Perl community who said that he once had dinner with people who make predictions, and it was the worst dinner he ever had, right? So I don't know anyone who makes accurate predictions, you know, 5 years in the future, and trying to, you know, a bunch of white guys sitting in Cambridge, Massachusetts, trying to predict world impact that 50 seems sort of outrageous to me. So, you know, we try to predict impact where it really matters and on some kind of reasonable scale, but it's not 50 years down the line. Does Dan have a microphone yet?
Yeah.
Go.
So, a bit of a contrarian question. I really like your technology. It's absolutely impressive. The fact that you have a sunlight-capable screen is about time. Thank you much. But here's what I'm not understanding.
Okay.
If any corporation came up and said, you know, we really want to get cell phones out to these places that don't have phones, but we're afraid of them calling people and saying bad things, and we really want to control what they're doing so they don't abuse this technology that we're giving them so that they can communicate. Maybe they'll communicate badly. We'd laugh at them. We'd tell them, go away. How dare, where do you get off like coming ahead and telling people what to do with your technology?
Okay.
And I guess my question for you guys is you guys have bought very much into the concept that your technology needs to be restricted. How
so?
Does that... You just gave a whole bunch of slides about how you really don't want to see your technology used for crime, for weaponry, for this, for that.
You will be extremely pleased when you read the spec to notice that one of the hard requirements in design is that the user has the ability to turn off every security system on the machine.
Including the cryptography,
including the
need to
crypto,
sign
including
stuff?
absolutely everything on the machine. Hard requirement in design that I set out since day one.
Attention to the amount I'm hearing about restricting the use of the technology, and I got to say, none of that would. If it was anyone but these guys, they wouldn't even be standing here.
Hey.
So anyway.
I'm Alien. We talked on the security mailing list a little bit, and just to build on what the last guy was saying, you have millions of laptops. You're distributing them to kids around the world. Cameras, they're running a unique OS so that an attacker can tell remotely that there's probably a kid sitting on the other end of this.
Maybe.
Probably.
It's
maybe. Possible. We talked on the mailing list about at least having some sort of logging of web activity or logging of IM activity, giving some basic education to parents. I haven't even heard the word parents mentioned in this entire thing. Don't they have a right to know what their kids are doing? And are these actually going to be incorporated into the specifications?
Interestingly enough, we had an internal security summit at the OLPC this last Monday. There were several people who were actually at ShmooCon in attendance. And I said that parental controls were an open question. And I would dare say we had some of the top experts in the field in the room. There was unanimous consensus that parental controls in the standard idea of parental controls should not be present on this machine. Now, that said, the machine does something called a journal. And the journal keeps track of the kind of things that you do on your machine for your own purposes, right? So you can actually show me all the things that I did on my computer yesterday. And you know, parents ultimately can exert control by being parents and taking away the laptop, or actually, you know, doing the nice thing and parenting. And you know, if they're looking for a technical solution to not have to be parents and do parenting, then we're not going to be able to provide that. But if they want to actually engage their kids when they're using this machine, they will have the ability to basically, you know, have. I mean, they're not going to hide things from the parents. That's the journal. The journal does this already for the user, and you can, if you're a parent and the kid lets you look at, what you've been doing, you can use the journal for something like this. And it's not privacy invasive. It's not, it's not a backdoor. It's not a Trojan that's there to sort of wrest away control. But I see Bruce moving in.
One more. We'll take one more.
I'll take. All right.
It's over here.
Who thinks that they have a really worthwhile one last question? Put your hand down. Smart.
I got something for you. Everybody here, when you're talking about the security, you're looking at the security impact.
Who's talking? I can't see.
Over here.
Okay.
Oh, right front. So
okay. You're talking about the security impact of outsiders affecting the third world nations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you yourself said that you were from Croatia, you learned a computer when you were young. Mm-hmm. Look at you now. My concern is that in 20 years, my concern is that in 20 years, you're distributing 100 million plus computers to third world nations that have no economic development structure in which they have any realm of having any common amenities in their country. So now what are they going to do? They're going to be, in 10, 15 years, the people that we're fighting against here. I mean, is there any impact or any studies or anything that you've thought about in regards to your training the hackers of tomorrow that are going to impacting the security of everybody else?
I just want to throw out one thing about that. I was talking to Dave Attell last night at the Felix, and he mentioned something about a GPL version of Canvas for this thing. So if anybody can find him and find out if that's going to go into production, I'd really like to know.
So, it's a common criticism for people to tell me, shouldn't you be giving kids clean water and food rather than laptops? And that's a very myopic view of things. If you look at the list of launch countries that we're going into, these are not countries that are on the extreme end of the poor spectrum. These are countries that have, clean water and food, etc., but they still have crap education or no education. So we're not diving in to the countries where, really kids are just starving to death by the millions, and we're trying to drop little colorful laptops to them, right?
In India, its economic infrastructure is still a baby in comparison to the United States. So for 100 kids to sit there and say, I'm going to work at McDonald's and I'm going to make this much money, that's not there for them. But now they're going to have this technology infrastructure where they're going to learn how to make the viruses. They become the phishing of tomorrow.
Yeah, so ultimately, and I have to end because Bruce wants to close and kick you all out. But, okay, so.
People are very excited. I do suggest, this has been going on for quite some time, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to go to laptop.org and get involved, all of us suggest that.
By the way, I will be here after closing, so come talk to me. You can play with the laptop a little. But finally, realize that there is also finally a distinction of what OLPC is doing versus what any large intake of computers in a country would be doing. And a number of the problems I heard mentioned, for instance, by Sean, not just in the questions, are really problems that are inherent to a bunch of computers showing up in a country, not necessarily to OLPC. So I think that the implicit assumption to the questions that as well, if OLPC wasn't doing it, then maybe no one would be doing it, and therefore we wouldn't have these problems to deal with. But that's not a very good approach to dealing with that question. So I hope that answers your question without trying to weasel it off. So I'll be here. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody on this panel. I know this is